Le Bourget, France. Winter morning, 2009. A man in his early 50s stands alone inside a secured hangar at the BEA Aviation Investigation Facility. Concrete floor, fluorescent lights, the smell of cold metal. He signs a logbook. Gloves on, no phone. On the table in front of him lies a bright orange cylinder, scarred but intact. The cockpit voice recorder. He has listened to dozens of these in his career. Fire, screams, confusion, silence. This one is different. He presses play. For the first few minutes, everything sounds normal. Routine call-outs, altitude checks, the calm cadence of a crew that believes the aircraft is behaving as expected. Then, something subtle changes. Not a sound, a reaction. The investigator leans closer to the console. The instruments, according to flight data, are still nominal at this point. Airspeed within tolerance, no stall warning, no system alerts. But in the audio, the captain's voice tightens. Not fear, confusion. He repeats a phrase. Then the first officer says something that doesn't match the readouts. A pause follows, longer than procedure allows. This is the moment the investigator rewinds. Again and again, because what he's hearing does not explain the crash. It complicates it. By the end of the first playback, he knows two things. First, the aircraft will still go down. The outcome is not in question. Second, the crew is reacting to something that does not appear in the data summary. He removes his gloves and writes a note in pencil, not pen. Crew perception inconsistent with recorded parameters. That sentence will matter. He hesitates, then adds another line. Do not circulate transcript section without context. The door opens behind him. Another investigator enters, younger, tired. Anything unusual? She asks. He looks at the recorder. Not unusual, he says, just uncomfortable. 3 days later, the internal review meeting takes place. Windowless room. 10 people. One screen. They listen to the same segment together. No one speaks while it plays. When it ends, the room stays quiet longer than usual. Someone finally says what everyone is thinking, but not out loud. If we include this, a senior official begins carefully. We invite questions we cannot answer. The investigator clears his throat. But if we exclude it, he replies, we're deciding that ambiguity is worse than error. That sentence lands heavily. A pause. Then the director speaks. We are not excluding it, he says. We are classifying it as non-contributory. The words are precise, legal, final. That classification triggers a chain reaction. Once marked non-contributory, the segment no longer requires public release. A decision is entered into the record, stamped, dated, irreversible. 2 weeks later, the preliminary report is released. The media narrative locks in quickly. Pilot error, environmental factors, icing, human limitations under stress. It's not wrong, but it's incomplete. The withheld audio segment is mentioned only obliquely. Certain non-essential crew communications were excluded for clarity. Clarity. The investigator watches the press conference from his office. A journalist asks if all relevant data was released. The spokesperson answers without hesitation. Yes. That night, the investigator deletes a draft email. He does not send it. He understands the cost now. Months pass. The final report is published. Training manuals are quietly updated across multiple airlines. New emphasis on instrument cross-verification during ambiguous sensor input. No reference to the accident by name. No public explanation. Inside the investigation community, the recording becomes something else. Not secret, just avoided. You can request access, but only with justification. And justification requires purpose, and purpose invites scrutiny. The investigator retires 2 years later. He never speaks publicly about the recording, but he keeps a copy of his handwritten notes, folded, unpublished. Here is what matters, and what comes next. The withheld audio did not point to sabotage. It did not reveal a hidden system failure. It did not contradict the crash outcome. It revealed something more dangerous to a system built on trust, that the crew experienced a reality the instruments did not fully capture. And once that possibility exists, it raises a question aviation cannot afford to leave unanswered. If pilots react to something that data cannot explain, which one is lying? In the next part, we'll follow what happened when others, outside the official investigation, began asking for that audio and what they stood to lose by hearing it. Montreal, Canada, early spring 2011. The email is drafted at 6:42 a.m. Aviation safety analyst Mark Delacour sits at a small kitchen table, laptop open, coffee untouched. Outside, the city is quiet. Snow still clings to the sidewalks. Inside, his cursor blinks at the end of a sentence he has rewritten 5 times. Requesting access to full CVR transcript sections withheld under non-contributory classification for comparative safety analysis. He knows exactly how this will be read. Not as curiosity, not as research, as a challenge. Mark works for a regional safety consortium that reviews major accidents years after the headlines fade. His job is not to investigate crashes, that's over. His job is to look for patterns, and this crash has been bothering him for months. Not because of what happened, but because of what stopped being discussed. Mark first noticed the gap while cross-referencing training updates. Multiple airlines had quietly revised procedures related to unreliable airspeed scenarios, years after the accident. The changes were subtle but coordinated. Language tightened. Decision trees shortened. Emphasis shifted from automation to crew perception under conflicting inputs. That kind of alignment doesn't happen without a reason. So Mark went looking for the reason. The public report didn't contain it, neither did the appendices. But in an obscure conference transcript, one never officially published, an investigator mentioned, "Crew perceived inconsistency not fully represented in telemetry." One sentence, no citation, no follow-up. Mark printed it and folded the page into his notebook. That's when he decided to ask for the audio. He knows the process. Access requests are routine, but only when framed correctly. Academic, limited scope, no public dissemination. Still, there's risk. Mark is not a whistleblower. He doesn't want to be one. He wants data. He clicks send. The email leaves his outbox. That's the point of no return. 3 weeks later, the reply arrives. Not from the archives department, from legal. The message is short. Your request raises concerns regarding misinterpretation of sensitive material outside its investigative context. Then the line that changes everything. Further pursuit may affect your organization's access status. Mark reads it twice. Access status. That's not about one recording, that's about everything. Flight data, confidential summaries, working group participation. His entire professional value is built on trust and access. He closes the laptop, doesn't reply. For now. 2 days later, his director calls him into the office. Glass walls, neutral tone. "We received a communication," she says carefully, "from Europe." She slides a printed email across the desk. It's not a warning, it's an observation. Mr. Delacour appears interested in materials classified as non-essential to causal analysis. That phrasing matters. Non-essential. Interest in non-essential materials suggests motive. "Are you trying to publish something?" the director asks. "No," Mark says truthfully. "Are you questioning the investigation?" He hesitates, just long enough. The director exhales. "Mark," she says, "this organization survives because we are useful, not disruptive." She doesn't threaten him, she doesn't need to. She concludes with a sentence that lands like a verdict. "We can't protect you if this becomes a problem." Mark withdraws the request. Formally, politely, he cites workload constraints and shifting priorities. The reply is immediate. Noted, access remains unchanged. The system relaxes. On paper, nothing happened, but something has shifted. At conferences, conversations end sooner when he approaches. A working group invitation doesn't arrive. A draft report he submits comes back with more edits than usual. None of it is overt. That's the point. 6 months later, Mark meets someone unofficially. A former investigator, retired, careful. They sit in a cafe near Geneva, voices low. "I heard you asked about the audio," the man says without looking up. Mark doesn't deny it. The man stirs his coffee. "You're asking the wrong question," he says. "What's the right one?" "Not what was said," the man replies, "but why everyone agreed not to repeat it." He pauses, because once you accept that crews can experience contradictions not resolvable by data in real time, you have to redesign more than procedures. Mark feels the weight of that. "What do you redesign?" he asks. The man finally looks up. "Authority." Mark returns home with nothing recorded, no documents, no proof. But he now understands the boundary. The audio isn't dangerous because it reveals a hidden cause. It's dangerous because it reveals a limit to what systems can explain, a limit to how much uncertainty trust can tolerate. And Mark is no longer the only one who has noticed. In the next part, we'll follow what happened when fragments of the withheld recording began circulating informally, inside training rooms, not courtrooms, and how one airline made a decision that acknowledged the ambiguity without ever admitting it existed. Toulouse, France. Autumn 2014. The simulator bay is dark except for the glow of instrument panels. Captain Elodie Marchand sits in the left seat, hands resting lightly on the side stick. She has flown this aircraft type for 11 years, thousands of hours. No incidents. Behind the glass, 2 instructors watch silently. "Unreliable airspeed scenario," one of them says. "Begin." The screens flicker. Numbers jump. Altitude holds, then doesn't. Elodie's eyes move. Not fast, not panicked, but something is off. The indications disagree in a way she hasn't seen before. She reaches for the checklist. The instructor interrupts. "No checklist," he says. "Fly it." That's new. This training module didn't exist last year. It appeared quietly, folded into recurrent training across several European carriers. No press release, no advisory circular, just a change. The briefing materials are thin, no references to accidents, no citations. Just a sentence highlighted in bold. When instrument data conflicts persist beyond standard reconciliation windows, crew authority supersedes automation logic. Elodie reads it twice. She looks up. "Why?" she asks. The instructor doesn't answer directly. "Because that's the profile," he says. They reset the sim. The scenario repeats. This time, Elodie ignores the conflicting numbers earlier. She flies pitch and power by memory, by feel. The aircraft stabilizes. "Good," the instructor says. Behind the glass, the second instructor makes a note. Not about her inputs, about her hesitation time. After the session, Elodie stays behind. She has a reputation for asking precise questions. That's usually an asset, usually. Is this based on a specific event? She asks carefully. The lead instructor closes the training file. No, he says. She waits. He lowers his voice. It's based on multiple considerations. That phrase again. Elodie presses. Has something changed in how the aircraft behaves? The instructor exhales. What's changed, he says, is how much responsibility we're willing to leave ambiguous. Then he adds something he shouldn't. This module wasn't written by engineers. That's the point of no return. Because now Elodie understands. This isn't about performance, it's about trust under contradiction. 2 weeks later, Elodie is called into a meeting. Not disciplinary, administrative. She's told she's been flagged as over-curious during simulator debriefs. Not unsafe, not insubordinate. Just persistent. The training manager smiles apologetically. You know how it is, he says. We standardize for clarity. Clarity. She signs the acknowledgement form anyway. Refusal would mean grounding. Elodie stops asking questions, but she starts watching patterns. She notices the same module appearing globally, slightly altered language, same core instruction. She notices instructors deflecting in identical ways, and she notices something else. The accident that started all this? It's never mentioned, not in class, not in documentation, not even as a case study. It has been removed from the teaching narrative, while still shaping the training. Meanwhile, Mark Delacour reads a draft internal bulletin that was never meant for him. It references scenario-based authority transfer under data conflict. No source, no explanation, just implementation guidance. He recognizes the language. It matches phrases he heard years earlier, during that quiet conversation in Geneva. Mark forwards the bulletin to a former colleague with a single line. This feels like response without admission. The reply comes hours later, because admission creates liability. By now, the withheld audio has achieved something unusual. It has changed behavior without changing record. Pilots are being trained for a contradiction they are never allowed to name. Institutions have adapted, silently, to something unresolved. And the cost of speaking about it has become clear. In the next part, we'll follow what happened when a fragment of that audio was finally described, secondhand, during a closed-door safety workshop, and how one sentence, repeated aloud, triggered an immediate shutdown. Hamburg, Germany. Early morning, February 2016. The conference room overlooks the river. Gray water, low clouds, no distractions. 12 people sit around the table. Safety analysts, training managers, 2 representatives from a manufacturer who don't introduce themselves by role, only by department. At the far end, a portable recorder clicks on. This is a closed-door aviation safety workshop. No press, no minutes released publicly. Attendance by invitation only. Dr. Klaus Richter, a human factors specialist with 3 decades of accident review behind him, stands at the projector. He is not here to accuse anyone. He is here to discuss ambiguity. Klaus advances the slide. Not an audio file, not a transcript, just a paragraph, summarized, anonymized. Investigators present described a withheld cockpit exchange, he says carefully, not as cause, as context. Heads tilt forward, pens move. Klaus continues. The instruments disagreed. The crew reacted in a way that did not match the data available. One of the manufacturer representatives shifts in their chair. Klaus notices. He keeps going. This isn't about error, he says. It's about human response to contradiction. Still neutral, still safe. Then he makes a mistake. He reads the sentence out loud, slowly. At the moment of maximum discrepancy, One pilot states that what they are seeing cannot be real. The room changes. Not dramatically, not visibly, but the air tightens. A man near the window closes his notebook. One of the manufacturer representatives leans toward the other. No whisper, just proximity. Klaus looks up. He realizes he has crossed a line. Because that sentence, that exact phrasing, was never released. It was never supposed to be repeated. The interruption is immediate. "We need to pause," one representative says. Polite, calm. "This characterization hasn't been validated," says the other. Klaus responds carefully. "It's not characterization," he says. "It's reported testimony." The first representative smiles, but there's no warmth. "And this session," he says, "is not authorized to evaluate unverified testimony." Silence. Then the recorder clicks off. A staff member from the host organization stands. "Let's take a short break," she says. No one moves. The workshop doesn't resume. Instead, people begin packing their things, quietly, efficiently. Within 5 minutes, the room is empty. Except for Klaus. Klaus sits alone at the table. The river outside hasn't changed. He gathers his papers slowly. He already knows what's coming. 3 days later, an email arrives. Subject line, participation review. It thanks him for his contributions to aviation safety. Then it informs him he will not be invited to future manufacturer-coordinated workshops. No accusation, no reason given, just exclusion. Across Europe, training materials update again. The language shifts slightly. Where it once said, "Crew authority supersedes automation logic," it now reads, "Crew authority may supersede automation logic when appropriate." One word added. May. Ambiguity restored. But the simulator scenarios remain the same. Contradiction without explanation. Mark Delacour hears about Hamburg from a colleague who was there. Not officially, over coffee. Someone read a sentence they shouldn't have, the colleague says. Mark doesn't ask which sentence. He already knows. That sentence has been haunting the margins of reports for years. Not the sound of panic, not a scream, but disbelief. Mark makes a decision he has avoided for a long time. He opens a secure folder on his laptop. Inside, notes, summaries, indirect references. Nothing classified on its own. But together, they form a shape. He drafts an email, not to the press, not to regulators. To a retired investigator who no longer holds clearance. Subject line. Question about withheld cockpit ambiguity. He hesitates. Sending this doesn't break a law, but it breaks a silence. He hits send. The reply comes faster than expected. 2 sentences. You're asking about the moment the model stopped matching the humans. Yes, that's real, and no one wants it framed that way. Mark leans back, because that confirms something critical. The audio wasn't suppressed because it revealed a failure. It was suppressed because it revealed a limit. A moment where certainty collapsed, not catastrophically, but quietly. By now, the system has adapted. Not by denial, by absorption. Training evolves, language softens, authority is redistributed, but the original question remains untouched. What happens when humans and instruments diverge, and neither is clearly wrong? That question never appears in official conclusions, because conclusions demand closure, and this moment offers none. In the final part, we'll follow the last place this audio fragment surfaces. Not in an investigation, not in training, but in a private legal dispute where ambiguity becomes liability. And why, when forced to choose between certainty and safety, institutions consistently choose the one that can be defended on paper. Even if it leaves the truth unheard, too loose for France. Late afternoon, autumn 2019. A conference room inside a legal office near the airport. No logos on the wall, no windows facing the runway. Just a rectangular table, 4 chairs, and a thick folder placed exactly in the center. Claire Moreau, Aviation Liability Counsel, adjusts her glasses and opens the folder. She is not an investigator. She is not a scientist. Her job is simpler and far more dangerous. She decides what questions are allowed to exist in court. The case is not public. A civil claim filed quietly by families after an aviation accident years earlier. An attempt to reopen a narrow aspect of responsibility. Not the crash itself. The interpretation of cockpit data. Claire flips through documents. She already knows the conclusion of the official report. Pilot error, environmental stressors, system performance within expected limits, standard. Then she reaches an appendix, a reference without attachment. Additional cockpit audio evaluated internally, determined non-material to causal findings. Non-material. That phrase again. Claire exhales slowly. She looks at the 2 people across the table. A former accident investigator, now consulting, an engineer seconded from a manufacturer's legal department. Neither makes eye contact. Claire asks a question she knows she shouldn't. Was the withheld audio ever assessed for liability exposure? The engineer answers first. No. The investigator hesitates. Not formally. Claire closes the folder. That is the moment. Because once ambiguity enters a liability framework, it stops being philosophical. It becomes dangerous. The engineer speaks carefully. If that audio were introduced, he says, it would imply the crew experienced contradictory inputs without a clear failure source. Claire nods. And that would mean? She asks. It would mean, the investigator says quietly, that no single party could be assigned full responsibility. Silence. Claire leans back. That's not a legal conclusion, she says. That's a structural problem. The claim is withdrawn 3 months later. Not denied, withdrawn. The families are told the evidentiary threshold cannot be met. No one lies, no one obstructs. The question simply becomes unusable. Claire archives the file. She writes one internal note before closing it. Ambiguity increases systemic exposure. That sentence never leaves the building. Across the industry, procedures are updated again. Crew training emphasizes cross-check discipline. Automation manuals expand sections on unexpected disagreement. But nowhere does it say what to do when the instruments disagree, the model disagrees, and human perception disagrees with both. Instead, pilots are taught how to exit the moment, not how to understand it. Mark Delacour receives a final message from the retired investigator. Short, direct. You were right to ask, but no institution can carry a question it can't answer. Mark doesn't reply. He knows this is the end of the line. The black box still exists. Its data is intact. Nothing is hidden anymore, technically. But meaning doesn't vanish when it's ignored. It just loses a place to stand. The audio fragment didn't accuse anyone. It didn't explain the crash. It did something far more disruptive. It showed a moment where reality refused to resolve cleanly, and in systems built on trust, certification, and closure, that is intolerable. This was never a story about conspiracy, or cover-up, or secrets buried in vaults. It was a story about containment, about how institutions respond when evidence doesn't fail, but doesn't fit, when ambiguity threatens confidence more than error ever could. The black box didn't reveal a hidden cause, it revealed a limit, and so it was set aside. Not erased, not denied, just never spoken out loud again. Because some questions, once acknowledged, can't be closed. And aviation, like all systems built on certainty, cannot afford that.